Take a quick look into immunology here. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the immune system as we did it a bit in anatomy, and then you also get it in microbiology. So more aligned with the micro side of things, you'll see a lot more of it there as well. So for immunology, essentially when it comes to our immune system, we have kind of three levels of defense. And so we have two sides of things where, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what it is that is trying to attack us. It's going to defend against it very readily. And these are both our surface barriers and our innate immunity. So it doesn't matter what it is that is attacking us, what is trying to get into us and destroy and harm us. Those two are working regardless of what the actual pathogen itself is. The adaptive immunity, on the other hand, is going to be very specific for the particular pathogen. And so whatever it is that's trying to invade us, we're going to essentially have a custom-made response to that particular antigen itself. And so we're going to look into that process a little bit as well. So when it comes to surface barriers, these surface barriers are just as the name implies. And so are the things that are on the body surface. When it comes to the body surface, remember that we have our skin, which is what we typically think of, but we also have things like the body cavities. And so body cavities themselves, as well as the tubes that run through us. So things like our reproductive tract, things like our digestive tract, our respiratory tract, things like that all have linings, and they're technically on the outside of the body. And so those are still to the outer portion of the body itself, and we need to make sure that we have protection against them. So we have this physical barrier there made up of epithelium, generating the ability to keep things out. And so as long as that's intact, it does a really pretty good job. And this is where the defense against things like mechanical issues are there as well. And so we have things like cilia to move things along the way. We have ways that we can make sure that things don't have the ability to adhere. We urinate often enough to where any bacteria that's starting to grow along the tubes there of the urinary tract are able to be flushed away, things like that. Same thing with things like even diarrhea. If we have a infection that is going on, we have a way to mechanically flush it out of the body, to get it off of the body and out of the way. And the same thing goes even for just things like tears. We're constantly kind of like a windshield on a car. We put on some spray there, which happens to be our tears, and then we wipe it away with the eyelids themselves. And so that helps to remove things that are potentially there. We have chemical barriers as well, things that are going to help with that process. And so we have ways to line all of these epithelial tissues so that they have substances that are there that are going to either reduce the ability of the organism to be able to come onto the surface in itself, or is going to help with killing it, stopping it from being able to live, things like that in terms of the surface that is there. And so the oils in our skin, things like our sweat, change what's going to be able to potentially grow on the surface of our skin. The pH of urine, by making it slightly acidic, this decreases the amount of growth that is there as well. Same thing goes with the stomach, and so gastric juices, keeping our pH at a very low level. And so down around a pH of 2 or so is going to decrease what can grow there. Urinary tract, reproductive tracts have things like lysozymes there, mucus that's able to destroy any kind of substances that may, or organisms that may try to land on those surfaces as well. And then we have all the things that we carry around with us at all times. And so the other bacteria that are there on our bodies and in our bodies. And so we have normal flora. This normal flora that's there essentially outcompetes the potential harmful stuff. And so this is what's going to if their numbers are up, they outcompete the bad guys. They outcompete the bad bacteria for the resources that are available, the limited amount of resources that we have. they're able to crowd them out. So this is the whole idea behind things like probiotics and things like that we find in the store and advertised and things, to increase the amount of normal flora that's potentially inside the gut at any given time, and thereby potentially helping with other areas of the body as well, just simply by what they're able to do in the gut itself. And so here we have part of that mechanical movement. We have cilia, and then in terms of the respiratory tract, that's also going to have mucus on top of that. And then as they move and as they beat, they're going to be able to move that potential pathogen up and out of the respiratory tract, get it to the throat, and then we can swallow it down and it gets destroyed by the gastric juices that are there as well. So one good way that those cilia there are within the respiratory tract to help to remove debris and bacteria and viruses and things like that that may come into the respiratory tract. If that, in a sense, starts to fail, and so if we're going to need to kind of ramp things up a little bit, we have innate immunity. Again, this is essentially what we're born with. So innate is we're born with this innate immunity. We don't have to specifically have a idea of what it is that is coming in us at us. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's going to treat all foreign invaders that are trying to come into the body the same way at any given time. And so they kind of do it in a generic manner, so to speak. So we have things like macrophages. And so we have macrophages running around the interstitial fluid. We have some resident macrophages that are in places like our skin or the liver, that are kind of wandering around looking for things in those areas as well. From there, we have a way of kind of containing the potential pathogens that are there as well. So we have complement proteins. Those complement proteins allow us to essentially slow down, stop, kind of wrangle up the potential invading cell that's there, keep it so that it's not able to move, and it potentially gives the macrophages time to get into that area. Two of the other things kind of go hand in hand. We have inflammation and then fever. And so the inflammatory process itself is going to bring about an increase in blood flow. So this is where we may start to see redness in the area of that particular area that may be getting invaded by some sort of bacteria or things like that, to allow for the cells and the nutrients and everything that we need. The capillaries enlarge in that area, so their pores start to increase in their size. And that allows for things like phagocytes to very easily leave those blood vessels. So it allows them to leave the capillaries themselves and move out in towards the area that we have the problem. So we're going to see an increased blood flow. So at the same time, we're going to see things like an increase in temperature. We're going to see an increase in potential redness in the area. We may see an increase in pain. So the area may become painful in that potential area. We may see an increase in swelling. So as we're bringing more into the area there, that all kind of goes with it into that particular area. From there, if we are in the need to, we can increase our body temperature. And so our whole body temperature, not just the local area, is going to be able to increase that body temperature, and we now have a fever. As that fever sets in, this is going to speed up all of our enzymatic reactions. So all of the chemical reactions that need to go along with potentially destroying things, getting complement to work, all of that increases, and their speed increases because we've increased the temperature for them to function. So when we have this process, part of that innate process that we have there, we have our bacteria that is coming into the area. And so that bacteria is starting to invade the tissue itself that's there. And so all these little purple guys here are our bacterial invasion that's there. From there, part of our white blood cells, our basophils, can start to release histamine. And so we get some histamine release into the area that's there. We start to get the release of complement as well. And so that complement going out there along with the histamine is going to start to immobilize some of the bacteria. It's going to keep it all kind of tucked away in one spot or another. The opening up of those larger pores allows our phagocytes to leave the tissue, go out, or to leave the vessel and go out into the tissues themselves. They can start phagocytosis. They can start gobbling up all of that bacteria that's there. They're going to then destroy them, kind of spit out their contents out the other end, so to speak. And now we have something that is no longer harmful to us inside the tissues them there. And then the bacteria can then move in terms of their loss of function at that time. Then the macrophages can move out of the area as well. If all of that is potentially not taking care of things, we then also have a customizable immune response. And so with this customizable immune response, each antigen is going to be, in a sense, coded for by a specific ability to recognize it. And so on our lymphocytes, they have special receptors that recognize the difference between self and non-self. And so if you remember back all the way back to cells, on the surface of cells, we have essentially kind of like a name tag. And that name tag tells us that it is either a non-self protein or a self protein. Self proteins tell us that it's a normal skin cell or a normal muscle cell, etc. It tells us that it's the normal tissue that's supposed to be there in the body itself. If we have non-self proteins, those are coded for on the receptors themselves, and it's specific to that individual antigen. And so it's going to be geared towards only that particular infection, whether it be in terms of the if it's the common cold, if it's COVID-19, if it's the flu, it's specific to only that particular antigen. And it's also specific to, in terms of like the flu or the cold, we, as it mutates and as it changes, we have different proteins that are there, and from year to year, we may not recognize it. What we do want to do is to be able to have a memory so that we don't get sick from that same one again. And so in response to that, we have our lymphocytes, our B cells and our T cells. The T cells are going out and, in a sense, kind of actively responding. The B cells are generating our antigens. The T cells are going out and actually destroying what is there. And as our memory of that and our antibodies increase, if we were to become infected again with that particular antigen, our response would go way, way up. So we would have a much stronger response the next time it comes along. So normally it wouldn't necessarily be that short. And so our antibodies kind of fade and fade and fade. And then we get hit by another spike in that particular infection. And our response is going to go up very fast. And it's going to go up very high. And then it'll eventually start to come down again over time and slowly reduce the amount that's there. And so this is where we get that immunity. This is where we're getting that response that is there that allows us to recognize that particular antigen every single time. Every single antigen has its own particular receptor. And so that receptor that is there is specific only to that particular antigen. And so this particular antibody cannot recognize this virus over here. It can only recognize that bacteria that's there. And so it's not going to be able to recognize any kind of other type that's there, only the one that it was, in a sense, programmed for in the very beginning. And so I know this is just a kind of a basic look into the immunology, but as I said, this will be covered a lot more in depth in kind of other classes as well. And so we'll continue on from here.